It's September 2016. I'm Cheryl Camm. I'm a composer, and I've walked up the Felton Road northwards to the 3 sycamores that sort of line up side on to the road. I became obsessed with these sycamores in about January earlier this year, and I decided to write a song about them. The thing about them is, because they grow up in a line, they've had to adapt their shape so as not to block out each other's light. And the middle one, which is the thinnest, is the tallest one. And so the 3 of them create this amazing shape. It's sort of curly and curvy, and it's got the knobbly bits from the little branches, and it's got a gap at the top there between the 2nd and 3rd trees. And in January and February and the winter, when there's no leaves, you can really see this shape. It's pretty good in the summer, or I suppose it's autumn now, but the leaves are still on and it's still a good shape, but I don't know, there's something about it in the winter with those branches. These trees are beautiful. There's sort of something monumental about them. Anyway, I decided to write a song, and I asked my friend Tony Williams, who's a poet, if he got any poems about sycamores, and he said he didn't, but he'd write one. And I told him about the context for this new song, and basically the choir in the village, the Bridge Singers, was going to do a concert in May of songs that somehow were connected to the village. About St Michael. Our concert was going to be in St Michael's Church. Rivers, bridges. We're called the Bridge Singers because the villages of West Thurston and Felton are divided by the River Coquet and joined by 2 bridges now, but one of these bridges, the old bridge, has been here for centuries. It's one of the first bridges across the Coquet, so a very important thoroughfare through Northumberland. And also the road is just by my side here. There's a building in the village that's got a plaque on it that said in 1650 Oliver Cromwell came through here on his way to the Battle of Dunbar. And so we were going to have some Civil War music and some readings from that time. And I told Tony about all this, and he said, give me a few weeks and I'll write you a poem. So he did, and the poem's called The Felton Sycamores, and it's all about the Scottish soldiers from the Battle of Dunbar. They were the defeated army, the Scottish army, and the prisoners that were taken were marched down through the northeast of England to Durham. A lot of them had died on the way, and a lot of them died when they were in Durham, and then the survivors were sort of sent across to America as slaves. And Tony had taken this story of these soldiers being marched through the village and these sycamores as a sort of memorial to them. A very powerful poem, very moving poem, very intense in a way. This was good for me because the Bridge Singers is a very jolly choir. This was going to be a good challenge for us all, and it gave me an opportunity to write some music for grown-ups that was sort of serious. After Tony had written the poem, but before I started to really set it to music, think about it too much, I met up with Tony and we discussed it at the cafe in Barter Books, which is a famous second-hand bookshop in the old station in Alnwick in Northumberland.
I really like that, what you sent me about the Battle of Dunbar and it being Cromwell's army and Cromwell himself. And it immediately made me think in terms of poems. There's a really famous poem by Andrew Marvell called An Horatian Ode on Cromwell's return from Ireland. So Cromwell went over to Ireland and did those sorts of unspeakable things there. And then the ode is him, Cromwell coming back, and it's sort of celebrating him, saying, "Oh, isn't Cromwell great?" But it's this amazing poem because it simultaneously says, "Isn't he great?" and also, "What terrible things, isn't he terrible? Let's have the king back." And at no point does it categorically say one or the other. So you can read it from either point of view. So you end up with this kind of nuanced view, and it's a brilliant poem. So I immediately kind of thought, well, I'll do a Horatian Ode on Cromwell's return from Scotland, from this thing. And then, and it's got a really specific form, this Horatian Ode. So it's got two lines and then two slightly shorter lines, and it's rhyming couplets and it repeats. And it's immediately recognisable in kind of poets with, "Oh, it's a Horatian Ode now." So I thought, well, I'll do that. And that's where the short lines come from in my poem. So I tried it and it didn't work out. I mean, that's always the way. So it doesn't work out, but I was left with these kind of short lines. And I suppose what did survive is that idea of trying to say something which isn't just political or polemical, the sense of, "Oh, Cromwell went and did these terrible things," because they did, but it's not. There's a sense that, okay, if the Scots had won, I'm sure the English wouldn't have fared very well either. So you don't want to be kind of, it's too simplistic to say, "Oh, Cromwell bad." And so that's why I wanted to have the sense that it opens out into any forced march. It's not just about this one event, but also the bit at the end, the bit in italics, "I beseech you in the bells of Christ."
The performance of it by the Bridge Singers in May. We did a recording in July. We've got recordings of readings using the words of Oliver Cromwell himself and also Sir Arthur Heselrigg, who was the governor of Newcastle at the time of the Civil War, and particularly in 1650 when this battle took place, and he was placed in charge of the Scottish prisoners. You'll hear the voices of Bob George and Richard Evans, who are members of our choir. Civil War marches played by Chris and Hazel Metherall. They're also members of the choir. Tony himself reading his poem.
But also, the bit at the end, the bit in italics, "I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken," is what Cromwell said to the Scottish army, sent a message saying, to avoid a battle, saying, "I beseech you, let's try to avoid having this battle." And he was probably just trying to, play mind games and so on, but there's also a sense that he was a deeply committed religious man, and he probably was trying to say, "Look, I'm in the right, please let's not have a battle." So I wanted the poem to also acknowledge that, but also to rebound that speech on Cromwell or on anyone who's in a powerful position, so that it becomes a kind of, it's him, but it's also saying it to him and all this.
The following is Oliver Cromwell to the General Assembly of the Kirk of Scotland on the 3rd of August 1650. You take upon you to judge us in the things of our God, though you know us not, though in the things we have said unto you, we have spoken our hearts, as in the sight of the Lord who hath tried us. And by your hard and subtle words you have begotten prejudice in those who do too much in matters of conscience depend upon you, so that some have already followed you to the breathing out of their souls, and others continue still in the way wherein they are led by you, we fear, to their own ruin. Indeed, we are not, through the grace of God, afraid of your numbers, nor confident in ourselves. We could, I pray God you do not think we boast, meet your army, or what you have to bring against us. We have given some proof that thought of that kind prevail not upon us. The Lord hath not hid his face from us since our approach so near unto you. Your own guilt is too much for you to bear. Bring not therefore upon yourselves the blood of innocent men, deceived with pretences of king and covenant, from whose eyes you hide a better knowledge. I am persuaded that divers of you, who lead the people, have laboured to build yourselves in these things, wherein you have censured others, and established yourselves upon the word of God. Is it therefore infallibly agreeable to the word of God, all that you say? I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken? Precept may be upon precept, line may be upon line, and yet the word of the Lord may be to some a word of judgment, that they may fall backward and be broken, and be snared, and be taken.
Said a bit about that, and I'd heard little tiny bits, but I hadn't heard the whole thing. So when I came to the performance, it was really impressive and wonderful, and the sense of wow, this is this completely different thing, not different in the way that it's doesn't fit with the poem, but it isn't the poem. You know, it's something.
Three Trees is the most difficult piece I've ever had to learn to sing. I find it extremely difficult, but subtly moving. So it was an enjoyment to be here, to be able to record it.
I did not enjoy the Three Trees when we did it at the concert, but the more we do perform it, the more I begin to enjoy it.
If in doubt, head for the B flat, and I loved it. Thanks, Cheryl.
The Three Sycamores, I just love it. It sends shivers down my spine, whether we're rehearsing it or whether we're performing it. It's ages since I've done more contemporary music, and apart from loving the overall mood that it gives, I just admire so much how cleverly it's written.
Fantastic
so that we can
to be in
to
a small village amateur choir that has both a poem and a new composition written specially for us. And it's not an ordinary composition, it's certainly stretching our
make a picture. Every time we sing it, I get a sort of visual picture of the soldiers, which almost makes me weep, and I really want to have a go at painting that maybe one day. But it's a smashing piece. And shedding dead my seas, so that the sick and
Good, now do it without me playing. 1, 2.
And shedding dead my seas, so that the sick and fair.
Will you sing it set tenor then? Then you wake up. That's a nice
I absolutely adore the Felton and Sycamores, which is not what I expected to feel when we first started it. When I saw it, and we did the very first run through, it absolutely terrified me. I've never seen such a collection of flats and naturals and discords and things, and I've certainly never tried to sing one like that before. But by the time we got to the concert, I had completely fallen in love with it, and I think it's one of the most spine-tingling things.
Hello, this is Alan. I did remark early on that when asked to comment on the Felton Sycamores, that it wasn't the sort of song I sang in the shower, but having got this far with it, it's really taken over. It's really atmospheric.
When we first started practicing it, little hairs on the back of my neck tingled, because it was just, it had an electricity about it that I thought was amazing. And we managed to produce that again in the performance in the church, which I thought was just very atmospheric and very emotional.
3, 4.
What a brilliant choir the Bridge Singers is, and what a privilege it is to have Cheryl as our musical director, and an absolute privilege that she's written this special song for us. The Sycamores is so moving when you get into the story about the soldiers and the fact that they probably marched through Felton all those years ago, and it's been wonderful singing it and learning it.
One of the members of our concert audience said she found it very, very emotional and really enjoyed it.
It's a evocative piece of a particular time in Felton's history, with the images of those poor soldiers tramping along the road. It's wonderfully written.
I just wanted to say that I think it's fantastic that we've got the chance to sing a piece for the very first time that's been composed with us in mind. And I think the thing that's been most significant for me is having the experience of listening to the poet recite his poem and then sing it back to him, and I think that was really moving.
The guy that was in charge of these prisoners in Newcastle.
Oh, is that Hazelray?
Yeah.
Yeah. Weirdly enough,
A letter from the Governor of Newcastle to the Honourable Committee of the Council of State for Irish and Scottish Affairs at Whitehall concerning the Scots prisoners. Gentlemen, I received your letter dated the 26th of October in that you desire me that 2,300 of the Scotch prisoners now at Durham or elsewhere, able and fit for foot service, be selected and marched thence to Chester and Liverpool to be shipped for the south and west of Ireland, and that I should take special care not to send any Highlanders. I am necessitated upon the receipt of this to give you a full account concerning the prisoners. After the battle at Dunbar in Scotland, my Lord General writ to me that there was about 9,000 prisoners, and that of them he had set at liberty all those that were wounded and, as he thought, disabled for future service, and their number was 5,100. The rest the General sent towards Newcastle. When they came to Morpeth, the prisoners being put into a large walled garden, they ate up raw cabbages, leaves and roots, so many, as the very seed and the labour at 4 pence a day was valued by sufficient men at £9, which cabbage, as I conceive, they having fasted, as they themselves said, near 8 days, poisoned their bodies. For as they were coming from thence to Newcastle, some died by the wayside, and when I sent them to Durham, about 70 were sick, and not able to march, and 3 died that night. And some fell down in their march from Newcastle to Durham and died. And when they came to Durham, and they being there towed into the great cathedral church, they could not count them to more than 3,000. Gentlemen, Of the 3,000 prisoners that my officers towed into the Cathedral Church at Durham, about 1,600 are dead and buried. I have granted to several well-affected persons that have salt works at Shields and want servants 40, and they have engaged to keep them to work at their salt pans. And I have taken out about 12 weavers to begin a trade of linen cloth like unto the Scotch cloth, and about 40 labourers. I cannot give you on this sudden a more exact account of the prisoners, neither can any account hold true long, because they still die daily, and doubtless so they will, so long as any remain in prison. We perceive that divers that are seemingly healthy and have not all been sick suddenly die, and we cannot give any reason of it. Only we apprehend they are all infected, and that the strength of some holds it out till it seize upon their very hearts. Now, you fully understand the condition and the number of the prisoners. What you please to direct, I shall observe, and intend not to proceed further upon this letter until I have your answer upon what I have now written. I am, gentlemen, your affectionate servant, Arthur Hesselwick, Governor of Newcastle, October the 31st in the year 1650.
The Felton Sycamores. Following the Battle of Dunbar, Cromwell's army force-marched 5,000 Scottish prisoners south to England. Most died on the way or after arriving in Durham. The rest were sold into slavery in the Americas. There grow inside my head on the Felton road 3 trees, the starving and the sick and those who will survive to go across England's ocean. The Scottish soldiers stood between Dunbar's red stone, that hard place the kirk, an English devil and the grey North Sea, and having lost were taken on a tramping way that the world knows well, a people passing by with foreign voices towards a something worse, that human pasts will mourn, but only landscape notice at the hour of its passing. How a sapling saw the march without a morsel, and shedding dead like seeds, so that has thickened there a grown memorial, whose bone-like roots can never quench the thirst of so much weeping, the memory of stumps that cares for no confession. On the long road the trees do not turn their faces, but upbraid the wind. I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken.